Thank you again for being here with us in Community Chats. My name is Sandra Arevalo. I'm the Director of Community Health and Wellness at Montefiore Nyack Hospital. And today we have a very interesting talk that I actually was very happy, I guess, but to attend in a prior meeting here in the community. And that's what sparked my interest to bring this to the whole community, because it's really an eye-opener for a lot of things that we sometimes don't think about, and how we can be affected during childhood and stress by not so happy moments, let's say, and that can have an effect later in life in our health. So I'm not the expert, of course. We have experts to talk about that today, and they are Joseph DiCarlo and Jacqueline Scott. And Jackie is the Director of Office for People with Disabilities for the Department of Health in Rockland County, and Joe is the Rockland County Probation Director. So I know they've been working on this together, and I'm so happy and grateful to have you here. I really think that the work that you're doing is phenomenal, and I'm so happy that you can do this for our community. And for those of you who are attending, I'm sure that you're going to be willing to share this further and further with other people. So I'll be sending the link to the recording to all of you so that you have it, and you can help us spread the voice about what the information that we're going to be sharing today. So I guess we can get started. I just have one more reminder for our attendees. Please participate with us. Use the reactions on Zoom, use the chat, the Q&A, send us comments, questions. I'll be reading all of those to Joseph and Jackie. And I know they are going to have some questions for you as well. So that's how we're going to communicate through the chat and the Q&A. So just start writing that I'm going to be reading all of that to our experts. Thank you, Joseph and Jackie, for being here today. I don't know if you want to say a little bit about you and your work before we get into the presentation.
Thank you, Sandra. For me, you said it, except that I just need to correct one thing. I don't work for the Department of Health. I work for the County of Rockland, directly for Ed Day, the county executive. And so I think if he were listening, he would want me to make sure everybody understood that. Yeah, Joe and I both work for the county. We work under Ed Day's direction.
Very nice.
And we'd like to say good afternoon, and we thank you all for coming. It's really terrific that you're participating in this. And thank you, Sandra, as the Director of Community Health and Wellness, and for all the staff at the Montefiore Nyack Hospital for having us here today. We really appreciate it. So the child may not remember, but the body does. And this is a quote from the documentary that we have shown a number of times in Rockland, and which Sandra had attended. And the documentary is called Resilience. Toxic stress can wreak havoc on the brains and bodies of young children, although we all know that trauma can happen at any age and at any time. As Sandra said, my name is Jackie Scott. I'm the Director of the Office for People with Disabilities for Rockland. And right next to me is my good friend and cohort, Joe DiCarlo, Director of Rockland's Department of Probation.
Good afternoon.
We originally introduced the film Resilience to Rockland County in 2019, just before everything shut down due to COVID. Timing is everything. It's a 1-hour documentary that delves into the roots of trauma, its toxic effects on individuals, and the building of resilience in order to disrupt those adverse effects of violence, addiction, mental health issues, disease, and so much more. We don't have time to show the film today, but we'll try and give you some information from it. The film began a movement already in place in Westchester, Orange, and Dutchess counties, as well as in many regions throughout the country. It initially began here in Rockland in earnest with the support of my Challenge Collaborative. Where it first came into play, though, was actually from Stanford University in California. And we started this with the viewing of the film at Rockland Community College. And to that event, we had invited about 130 representatives from school districts and community-based agencies in the county. Following that initial showing, there was a lot of energy for building a coalition based on resilience and its findings and its teachings. But like so many other things in our world, so we were interrupted by the pandemic. We've screened the film Resilience 4 additional times in the last year to educate, inform, and recognize responses to toxic stress in both young and old. As all of us are aware, since the onset of COVID, toxic stress has become even more exacerbated. It's affected all of us and those we interact with on a daily basis, and especially since COVID. It's important to recognize and understand that resilience will enable the community to fight back with evidence-based proven therapies and techniques.
So we're going to start you off with just a brief overview, and we're going to touch on a lot of topics inside these topics. We're going to talk about today what is trauma, discuss some various types of trauma, the impacts of trauma. Jackie's going to walk you through the ACEs questionnaire. So we'll have a chance for this to be as interactive as we can in a virtual world. And we're going to talk about resilience, protective factors, identify the 3 pillars of wellness, trauma, and resilience. And if we have time, because we're trying to put so much information in a limited amount of time, we will have time to review the resilience questionnaire, which is also an individual tool for you. If time does not allow, this will be in your handouts to cover. So what is trauma? The SAMHSA definition here. Let me go back. I'm sorry. What is trauma? It's a traumatic event is one in which a person experiences, witnessed, or is confronted with actual or threatened death, serious injury, threat to the physical integrity of self or another. And our responses to trauma may include intense fear, helplessness, horror, and attachment. And we're going to go a deeper dive into all of this afternoon. So according to SAMHSA, trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically and emotionally harmful or threatening. It can have lasting adverse effects on an individual's physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. And it's not just the event. It's one's reaction to the event. This is all about the individual person. And what we want to emphasize here is stress. It becomes toxic when it's not acknowledged or responded to. Important to realize adversity becomes traumatic when experiences can't be shared or talked about. So if somebody experiences something, think about a shaken bottle of soda. When we don't have the right resources to let go, it's going to have an effect. It's going to have an effect. And trauma happens when we get triggered into these states and we can't get out. And when we don't have the internal skills or external supports to restore, and these words are important, we'll talk about them later, safety, connectedness, and self-regulation. And again, we'll talk about that a bit later, but it's just having that capacity and those resources to handle the situation. So, events and experiences that can contribute to trauma, this is not a limited list. Again, trauma is up to the individual. These are just some ideas of what's happening. As you go through this, there's a reason I don't watch the news anymore, right? Local stories are war, murder, assault. Dealing in law enforcement, I don't like to hear this all day long, especially when I go home. Absent from this list, Jackie mentioned, it's also COVID. That extreme isolation. We all had a shared experience, and I'm sure we have all reacted in similar or very different ways, and we know people that have reacted in various ways to this. I had my house was burglarized about 30 years ago, probably more. Came home, and when you walked in the front door, you can see the kitchen, and it was a ranch house. And I remember that night, cold February night, it was about 0 degrees out, came back from a wedding, ice on the floor, and all the kitchen cabinets were open. And just that feeling I got, that sunken feeling I had, went in the house, called police, the whole 9 yards, the whole house was just turned upside down. 30 years later, I have 3 children, and any given day, all of my kitchen cabinets could be open when they're hunting for snacks or looking for something. And I might come home from work and I see that. Again, a ranch style house. I think I need to change my house. But as I looked in the kitchen, I could see the cabinets open. And for that split second, I need to check myself. I get that feeling. It goes all the way back to 30 years ago. I get a little tense, and I just calmly walk into the kitchen, close the cabinets, and restore my state of mind, and we're back to normal again. But those seconds, milliseconds, can seem so long. Could seem so long. So that's my personal experience there. I've also had several knee surgeries. I don't know if anybody else has shared this, but now I need a knee replacement. I don't want to get it done. My recoveries were not good. They're challenges. This is something I'm putting off. It's hard for me to handle right now. So I'm hoping I can come around to do what's best for me health-wise. To be continued.
So we've all experienced trauma in one form or another, I would not hesitate to say. We've all had many different traumas in our life, some more important than others, some way more traumatic than others. But all of us, I think, understand trauma in one form or another. So what are the types of trauma? First of all, there's developmental trauma. And that's where we see the ACE study come into play, which we'll do in a few minutes. This usually begins at home, and it's linked to caregiver behavior. It could be chronic or sustained. It could involve multiple or repeated experiences, or be a one-time event that has a lasting impact, like the death of a parent or sexual assault, etc., burglary. There's historical and intergenerational trauma. This occurs over a lifespan to a large group of people, such as genocide, slavery, war, colonialism, and the list goes on. The impacts are long-standing and affect both the individual as well as the collective. Colonialism, removal of children from family and home, and the destruction of culture and language is very important here. Intergenerational trauma can be passed down from one generation to the next. That's really important. For example, the impact of residential schools transcends generations and is linked to higher rates of substance use, mental health issues, and behavioral issues. Effects of trauma can transfer in many ways, including the inability of parents to attach to a child, disrupted family functioning, and disconnection from social groups and culture. Then there's cultural trauma. Culture is an aspect of how we define ourselves, and this creates a sense of meaning in our world. Loss of culture can prevent someone from fully engaging with others. Trauma can result from the endless chronic stress an individual experiences when faced with racism, with poverty, homelessness, unemployment, the stigma of incarceration, etc. And again, as Joe mentioned with COVID, many people faced unemployment from that, or loss of a business, or loss of an individual, a person close to them. Interpersonal trauma are events that take place between people that we know or even that we don't know. When we're abused by others, particularly those we know, the impacts can be devastating and very long-term. Interpersonal trauma can include witnessing abuse, experiencing violence, rape, sexual assault, intimate partner violence, and child abuse. We also have system-oriented trauma. Our policies and practices as an organization are predicated on history, values, and preferences, and they don't necessarily incorporate what we know today. Some can actually trigger or re-traumatize our clients. It doesn't mean that we should change policies and practices, but we should be aware that some of the routine tasks that we engage in can trigger a traumatic reaction, and that a response should be trauma informed, which you'll hear that term a lot. We'll be talking about that. Creating external conditions of resilience in our relationships, service systems, and communities is really critical to systems change. There's vicarious trauma, indirect trauma, compassion, fatigue, secondary trauma, etc. This form of trauma is associated with the cost of caring and exposure to human suffering. Bearing witness to the pain suffered by others is difficult and may impact a service provider on many levels. I think of doctors and nurses. I think of those people who work in hospice. I don't think I could be exposed to that every single day without being traumatized myself. Reactions are the same as those who experience trauma directly: nightmares, feeling emotionally numb, difficulty trusting others, increased illness and fatigue, increased sense of danger, shame, etc. Very, very difficult.
Yeah. And on the heels of everything Jackie just talked about, it's so much, and you could probably have an individual course on each one. We wanted to share this picture, and again, related to ACEs. And you could see the roots of many of the problems we see out in the community linked to poverty, discrimination, community disruption, lack of opportunity, social capital, poor housing, affordable housing, and violence, and just how a lot of behaviors are rooted in the community to those issues. And it's a very important concept as we think about being trauma informed, or as we learn more about trauma, where it comes from. So just something to keep in mind. And again, the longstanding impacts of childhood abuse and trauma. When we talk about children, we've been very general right now, but trauma impacts a child's ability to learn, his or her ability to interact or socialize with others, their emotional development. If the child struggles in school, he or she, they may drop out early. Okay, to cope with trauma, many people, they adopt high-risk behaviors. This is what I see in the probation world. Somebody comes to me with behavioral issues, substance abuse, self-harm behaviors, high-risk sexual behaviors, negative peer involvement, on and on. These behaviors on the short term may help the individual survive, or at least help them think they're surviving the impact of abuse. But the reality is it leads to long-term health risks like heart disease, criminal justice problems, mental health issues, and unfortunately, it's early death. So it's something we need to stop and think about.
So what are the adverse effects and the adverse childhood experiences? Adverse childhood experiences, which is what we also know it as ACEs, and when we hear ACEs, that's what it means, adverse childhood experiences, are stressful or traumatic events such as neglect and or violence during childhood. It's strongly related to brain development and a wide range of health problems throughout a person's lifetime. ACEs is not diagnostic trauma. The potential traumatic effects of ACEs are counteracted by a safe, connected, and regulated environment. ACEs may include, but aren't limited to, physical or sexual abuse, domestic violence, living in poverty, parental mental illness, discrimination, substance use disorder, or even incarceration. In simple terms, these are issues we aim to address so that we can engage in diverse stakeholders in developing policy goals that support efforts to address adversity rooted in systems and communities. We need to ask the question, what's in your soil? What's going on inside of you? So communities can begin to set goals and implement policy and practice change that builds resilience. Adverse childhood experiences in the context of adverse community environments continuously assault the developing minds of children and negatively impact health across their lifespan. The mental health problems, early initiation of drug and substance abuse, dropping out of school, juvenile delinquency, risky sexual behavior, and teen pregnancy. But by building community resilience, we understand that many adverse childhood experiences can be linked to policy and system-driven inequities. So we really need to address this and give access to economic mobility that may allow families to secure safe and affordable housing and living wages. There's racial and social inequities which create toxic conditions that undermine resilience at all levels. And addressing these inequities builds resilience at all levels.
So what is, well, it's important to understand when we're discussing this, we often see people being mistaken as oppositional or difficult, coming from a criminal justice field. We may say they're difficult, they're being difficult, they're oppositional, they don't want to do this. And, perhaps in other fields as well, we may say there's a lack of consequential thinking, that person has no affect, perhaps they're unmotivated. And in reality, the question is, perhaps they're just not ready. And that's something to think about as we start to go into the ACEs.
Okay, so we talked about some of the impacts of ACEs. And I think now that we want to get into the actual questionnaire, the ACEs questionnaire. So what we'll ask you to do, we're going to put it up on the screen to take the ACEs. Second one or the first one? Okay, so we're going to ask you just to look at these questions and answer them as truthfully as you can, and see what your score is. And if you would, you don't have to put your name in the chat, but if you would put your score, that would be wonderful. And Sandra will see your score. We'll give you a minute or two to do it. And then we can talk about it. What does it mean? So if you would start to do that now, Sandra, you can look in the chat and see what the answers are.
So Jackie, how do we score the ACE?
Sorry?
How do we score it? Like we
Okay,
answer each
so
question?
you're gonna answer this
Yes or no?
yes or no.
Okay, and each yes, it's 1 point.
Correct.
Correct.
Then you just add the points and you put the total in the chat.
Right.
Okay, so again, you go through the 10 questions. If it's a yes, you score 1 point. At the end of the 10, you add those points and please share your score in the chat.
Ask the question about how many had this and that.
Okay, are we about done? Can everybody?
People are starting to put the numbers down just now.
Okay,
So far, we have a 1, a 1, a 3, a 1.
and these are our questions. How many ones do we have?
Okay, so 3 1s so far and 1 3.
Okay. And we're still waiting for more?
Yeah, let's give it another minute.
Sure.
So again, the idea here is you read the 10 questions on the screen, and for each yes that you have, you count 1 point, and then you just write the points
Mhm,
in the chat.
exactly.
I think we can go ahead.
Okay, so Sandra, how many ones do you see?
I see 1, 2, 3, 4 ones,
And how many 2 or 3s?
2 or 3s, 1,
Okay, how many 4 or above?
none. But I
Really?
do have a question though. For question number 9,
Yeah,
at the time it was no, but after the age of 18 could change to yes. So which one is it? Is it no
yes,
or yes? It is a yes.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So what's interesting is that researchers were surprised to discover that many people in the general population had a score of 4 and above. And actually, what's even more interesting, they gave this test to judges in Westchester, and they scored the highest of everybody, way over 4, which was very, very interesting. It's this group seems to be pretty well adjusted, which is wonderful. We're glad to hear it. It's not a diagnostic of trauma. The potential traumatic effects of ACEs are counteracted by a safe, connected, and regulated environment. But preventing ACEs in children also means addressing the effects of ACEs among caregiving adults. Helping parents address the impact of trauma and ACEs in their own lives prevents trauma and ACEs later on in children.
And let's talk about this. So there are reactions to trauma. We've identified some of the areas where people can be exposed. And what do we see? You know, and again, the slide is pretty basic: unexplained chronic pain or numbness, stress-related conditions, headaches, sleep problems, digestive issues. You know, in many fields, we tend to see the problem and we have to tell somebody, stop doing that, or just do this. You know, we see that behavior, we want to treat it, and we often fail to recognize or understand the underlying trauma. We often deal with the behaviors, again, not the trauma, and people fail as a result. And just to reiterate, they can hold it together on the short term, but statistics show they cannot be successful in the long term.
Absolutely.
You know, so different areas where people, you know, as we went over the physical before, there's also emotional and cognitive reactions, anxiety, depression, anger issues, fearfulness. One is often distracted or can be disassociated. Interpersonal, right? Frequent conflict with others, a lack of trust, difficulty establishing relationships, close relationships, difficulty setting boundaries. And behavioral, again, this is the result, right? This is what we see. Substance abuse, self-harming behavior, criminal behavior, and high-risk sexual behavior. So again, traumatic experience can have a long-standing negative impacts on a person. And this is especially true if events or conditions happen in childhood. And that's the importance of that ACEs, because we're getting down to the root of what's happening.
So Maya Angelou said, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. And it's so true. Resilience is the capacity to shift into a state of safety, connectiveness, and self-regulation by engaging both internal skills and external supports. It's the ability to bounce back from challenges and hardship. We all have challenges. We're all going to have challenges in our lives and hardship in our lives, but it's the ability to bounce back from that, not to let it affect the rest of our lives. If we as helpers can remain safe, connected, and regulated, even when somebody else is not, they will experience and learn resilience. All it takes is one connected adult to counteract trauma and build resilience. Parental and child resilience have been shown to reduce the negative impacts of ACEs.
So how does this happen? We look at something called protective factors, and we'll talk more about this in the 8 dimensions of wellness. We'll go over in a little bit. But protective factors that boost resilience may include supportive and caring relationships, social connections, programs that understand a person's background and culture, a healthy lifestyle, regular exercise, mindfulness, getting sufficient sleep, eating a healthy and nutritious diet, economic support, stability for families, quality childcare, and education early in life. So, and what's important to realize, we're going to bring this back again to the three pillars of wellness. And pardon this slide, it's a little bit crooked. That's my fault. But
it's okay. I think my eyes are a little crooked today anyway. So when we no longer feel safe or connected or regulated, we begin to shift into primitive survival states of fight or flight or freeze or shut down. Wellness happens when we experience safety, connectiveness, self-regulation. Adversity happens when there's a disruption in that safety, connectedness, self-regulation. Adversity happens when there's a disruption in that, and trauma happens when we're unable to restore that safety, connectiveness, or self-regulation. And then resilience finally happens when, again, that safety and connectiveness, that self-regulation is once again restored. So bottom-up mind-body interventions are critical for helping individuals develop implicit skills of resilience. It's something we have to learn. It's something we have to work on every day. These complement top-down therapeutic approaches and are especially important for any of us who experience trauma.
And Jackie, we have a comment here. It says, I find comfort food can bring back good memories, which is helpful when being stressed.
Yes, I think both Joe and I
Yes.
understand that. He's Italian, I'm Jewish. Our families are all about food and comfort food, and there's nothing wrong with that, as long as we don't eat to the extreme. Again, everything has to be within boundaries.
yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more of this in wellness. It's perfectly okay to go back, draw on the good times to get you through. Perfectly okay. And again, this is a very individual way of looking at this. So as we go into the dimensions of wellness, there are 8 codependent dimensions: emotional, physical, occupational, social, spiritual, intellectual, environmental, and financial. And we've alluded to all of these already. And if any one of these dimensions is neglected over time, remember that tree, it'll adversely affect one's health, well-being, and quality of life. And it's important as we talk about these 8 stages, they do not have to be equally balanced. Okay, what we want to do is strive for a personal harmony. What feels authentic to us? What feels authentic to you? We naturally have our own priorities, our own approaches, our own aspirations, including our own views of what it means to live life fully. And people often think about wellness in terms of physical health, right? We think of physical health, nutrition, exercise, weight management, but it's so much more. It's a holistic integration of physical, mental, spiritual well-being, fueling the body, engaging the mind, and nurturing the spirit.
And food does come into that.
And
for
food comes
sure.
into that.
Absolutely.
And, although it always includes striving for health, it's more about living life fully. And this is an individual goal, right? It's a lifestyle and personalized approach to living life in a way that allows you to become the best kind of person that your potentials, circumstances, and fate will allow. Very, very important. And just for a couple of examples, as we talk about this, and somebody said thinking about the good times, deep breathing to satisfy emotional, religion can help satisfy that spiritual. Learning satisfies that intellectual component. Exercise, eating well, satisfies that physical component. For me, my desk is a wall of paper. I feel better when I declutter to fix that environment that I work in.
I second that.
Financial health, review, plan, save. These are responsibilities we should go over so we feel safer and better about where we're at. Occupational, be mentally present every day. Avoid that toxicity. And social work, socially. And this is important. I'm not alluding to online behaviors. In-person social networking, that connectivity with people, perhaps a mentor. So these are ways to help balance your life in these 8 different fields. We have time to do resiliency questionnaire.
Okay. So the resiliency questionnaire talks about caring and support, optimism and hope for the future, opportunities for meaningful participation, positive bonds, clear and consistent boundaries, and life skills. Because research suggests that the greater number of protective factors and strengths, internal as well as external resources, the more resilient you are. And you can build your own resilience by increasing available protective factors. So let's take a look at this test over here or quiz, I don't know what you want to call it, but take a look at this one. Let's look at that again. And again, you're going to answer yes, sometimes, or no, and then we're going to add up the scores.
Yeah, and in the interest of time, just try to go through quickly.
Yeah, try and go through it quickly and put your answers in the chat. How many 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s? One for yes, 2 for, well, yes sometimes and no. So at the bottom, you'll add that up. Total number of yes, total number of sometimes, and total numbers of no. How are we doing, Sandra?
So no responses so far.
Okay,
You know, I'm doing it myself to try to see how fast I can go.
okay,
That's
Haven't
fine,
finished.
yeah.
okay.
So I'm thinking maybe other people haven't finished either.
That's not a
And that's
problem.
okay. And this is a very individual, nobody needs to share at this point. This is
Mhm.
just for somebody's self-reflection.
We have the first answer is 14 yes.
Okay,
It's 14 yes, 4 sometimes. Now it's a yes 4 times. Yes 4, sometimes 12, no 2. Yes 9, sometimes 7, no 2. 14 yes, 4 sometimes.
so what you may want to think about is a good idea might be to pick one item that you scored sometimes, 1 or 2 items. Think about it. Think about what you can do to increase the availability of this protective factor. How can you make that work for you? What can you do so that you feel more secure in that? You feel better about that. That's really what this is all about. To understand where we're lacking those protective factors, where we're lacking that total resilience, and what ways can we think of that we can improve upon that, make that better for us, healthier for us. And for each person, that's very, like Joe said before,
Very
very
different.
individual. And there's no one right answer to that.
So the idea is to work on the sometimes, not on the no's.
Well, or the nose
Or
as
the
well,
nose.
correct.
The sometimes and the no's. Absolutely. The yes, you're okay. If you're being honest with that, but it's the sometimes and the no, you really want to start thinking about it, and you can't do it all at once.
Mhm.
So you pick, okay, I'm going to work on this right now. And once I'm okay with that and I feel better about that, then I'm going to work on something else where I'm having issues.
We have a comment that just came in. Stop being a workaholic. I've been telling myself for a few years.
I've been telling myself what?
For a few years to stop being a workaholic.
Aha.
Mm,
That's
And-
one I understand a lot.
yeah,
And
it's, yeah.
Because I am one also.
Mhm.
And I'm really trying to work on that. It's not easy. I come from a family of workaholics. Um,
And go back to those 8 domains we spoke about before. You know, some of that is your environment, set some boundaries, you know, learn to cut it off. You leave work, and it's there the next day.
Right.
Don't look at your emails all night long. Don't, you know, you need to put your phones down and live your life too. Right?
Exactly.
We work to live or we live to work. Which one is it? You know, so we strive to get out of that cycle of behavior. And again, it's individual. Some of us may like to check our work email and we think that's fine. You know, I do it nightly as well. And I'm okay with that. But sometimes it reaches the point where you have to just take control and reset your own equilibrium.
Right.
And it may be work, it may be something else that's going on at home. It's important in those domains to find out what works for you.
Right.
What is it that you need? Again, this is really individual.
Right. I have a supervisor and he said to me when I went on vacation, turn your phone off. Do not look at any work emails. None. You just have to turn it off. It wasn't easy because when something comes in, I tend to look at it. I tend to answer it. And he said, you've got to stop doing that. And I know that it's hard to do. We're wired for that. Like I said, I inherited that with my family. It's also a cultural thing. Americans tend to be like that. But if you travel at all, like
Mhm.
I do, when you go to other countries, it's not like that. The culture isn't like that. So it's easier to relax and to fit in that culture. If you go to Italy, you go to France, you go to Spain, we're one of the few countries that everybody is constantly working, no matter whether you're at work or at home or on vacation. So it's not an easy thing for us to change, but it's something I know I'm working on. I think Joe's
I try to
working on
work
it.
all the time.
Yeah, on that. And it's really it's a good thing to work on because we live longer when we're not working all the time. That we our bodies get to relax, our minds get to relax, and we're able to enjoy other things.
So, Jackie and Joe, I have a question. For example, this thing about working a lot, right? I remember years ago, I was in, just after I finished college, I think it was like my first job or something like that. And they did a quiz and they said, what do you enjoy the most? And a lot of people said vacation, spending time with my kids, and I put being at work. Everybody's looking at me like you didn't understand the question, but then it comes to my mind that sometimes, okay, we know that being at work all the time and working too much might not be as good, but if it's something that you enjoy, but then at the same time, I'm thinking, some people enjoy alcohol and they might be getting drunk every night because they enjoy it.
Yes, again,
Like how do we make that differentiation between this is bad or this is good? Like people can get addicted to exercise, right?
yes,
Yes.
you're right.
Is great.
I remember when I remember a few years back, I mean, it's quite a while now, that there was this phase that people were eating carrots all the time.
Mm.
Well, people were turning orange from eating
Yes.
so many carrots.
Mhm.
Yes, it's healthy to a point, but anything to the extreme is no longer healthy. So that was no longer healthy once you took it to the extreme. It's the same with anything. You can eat as comfort food, but if you're eating all the time, it's not healthy for you. If you're working all the time, it's not healthy. So to me, my motto is to try and keep things in moderation,
Mhm.
not extreme on one end or on the other end.
Mhm. I find that sometimes people around us are better at observing
Mhm.
our extreme behaviors, right? Like, for
Yes.
example, and I'm gonna cite another time in my life where, one time I was talking to my daughter and she was on her phone a lot. And then I said, oh my God, I want you to look at me when I talk to you. And then she said, well, this is what you do all the time when you talk to me. You're just looking at your phone.
Yeah.
And I was in shock. I'm like, do I do that?
Yeah.
Like I never realized. So she was just, you know, basically doing what I was doing.
Yeah. And
So,
that's a whole different area of concern. And that's new to all of us,
Right.
But part of this rebalancing might be for some people is to just put your phone down for a while
mhm,
and be present
yeah.
and be present. And that's so important.
And
Mhm,
also, sometimes it does take a third party. It takes somebody on the outside, a good friend, a parent, a brother, a sister, a family member, to say, hey, you're doing A, B, C, or D, and to be open to that.
mhm,
And I know I've had that and said, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize it. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Mhm.
So you have to be open to it. And that might be something to think about, being open. And sometimes I'll go to a good friend or something and ask, what do you think? This is what I'm doing. What do you think?
Mhm.
Because sometimes we don't see it when we're in the moment and it's just ourselves.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like sometimes we can tell a family member, you know, I think you're drinking a little bit too much these days.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Or you're smoking more than usual, or you're yelling more than usual, or you're sleeping more than usual. You know, I think that sometimes we don't see those behaviors in ourselves. And, you know, we need to, I love how you say it, Jackie, we need to listen, but we also need to keep attention or like pay attention to the behaviors of those we love that are around us to, you know, give that feedback and bring them back to
Yeah. And just remember, we see the behavior, but we need to identify the causes
Right.
and keep that communication open.
absolutely. Because
Exactly.
the causes could be anything that you were saying in the beginning of this presentation.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
you know, you might not just start drinking for the sake of it. It might be that something is triggering that. Like, so we
Yes.
need to look deeper into the causes to be able to fix the
behavior.
To fix it long term.
To fix it long term, exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. Do we
I
have
don't
any
know
more
if,
questions?
yeah, I don't know if any of our participants have any final questions. We have like just 4 minutes. So if you have questions, hurry up, or we might not be able to give you the answers. But I think this is a very interesting discussion. I think that we could talk about this so much more. And Jack, is there a link to see the movie, the Resiliency documentary?
There is not. They're very protective of the rights of the film. However, we have copies of the film. If folks would like to see it, if you think you can set something up, we would be happy to come and show the film and have a discussion afterwards. As you know, Sandra, we've done.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we can certainly do that if there's a group that would like to view the film
Mhm.
and then have a discussion afterwards.
Yeah, I think that the film is really great. And
It
especially, you know, I
is.
like the fact that it was done in Rockland. So it really touches in our community. So
Mhm.
I will work on that. Actually, I'm just thinking at an idea right now. Maybe we can do it at one of the libraries so people can come and watch the movie at the library, and then we can have the discussion. But this will have to be in person, though. People cannot just do it on Zoom.
That's
Or
right.
I wonder if we can do it on Zoom. We'll see, but I'll work on it.
Okay, sounds good.
Sure.
Yeah, it's probably better in person if possible.
Yeah, I think that
Um,
person will mean.
Yeah,
very
but
much.
we need a longer period of time because the film is an hour,
Yeah, so we need at least double that, maybe
right? And that's why we
2
couldn't show it.
hours. Free popcorn. I'll bring the popcorn. No sodas because we don't drink soda. But
Well, every once in a while you need to indulge.
true. That's true. Just you hear the click and makes you want some. Anyway, so thank you so much. I don't see any more questions. So thank you. I know it was very hard to do in an hour and you guys covered a lot. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it's a
I know
lot
it
of
was very
Yeah,
hard.
it's a lot of
work.
information.
Yes, so thank you. And we'll keep in touch. And we'll see how we can bring more of this to our community. And thank you to all of our attendees. Next week is Stop Seasonal Sniffles. So if you suffer from any seasonal allergies, this session will help you prepare to be healthy through seasonal allergy season. I don't know. Okay. So thank you so much to both
Thank
of
you for
you.
having
And
us.
thank you to our attendees. There is one more comment here. It says, thank you, great information. Thank you for the presentation. And I will see you next week.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thanks for
Sandra.
having us.
Of course, thank you for
Have a great
accepting the
day. Happy
invitation.
Easter to anybody who's celebrating Easter, a happy Passover.
Thank you, same to you.
See you soon.